So the Institute for Security Studies has warned that criminal activity is set to increase in the country due to extended blackouts. Blackouts are an opportunity for criminals to exploit, and an increase in expected crimes such as home and business robberies is likely. For more on this, the Institute for Security Studies Johan Burger joins me now for that conversation. Dr. Burger, thank you so much for your time. So just draw the link for us then between the power outages, the orchestrated power outages, and an increase in certain categories of crime.
Yes, thanks, Dula. I think the important point to keep in mind here is that we already have high levels of crime. The upward trend started, as far as serious and violent crimes are concerned, already in 2011, 2012. There was a short break last year when we had the hard lockdowns, but we are back on track in terms of rising crime levels, and especially serious and violent crimes. And it includes aggravated robbery with its subcategories of house robberies, business robberies, carjackings, and so forth. So keeping that in mind, we have to look at the criminal fraternity of this country. We know they are extremely creative, innovative, and if you look at the ESCOM app, which tells us which areas will experience load shedding during which times, then criminals certainly will also have access to that information. And they will, because they are opportunistic, they will exploit that information and the fact that certain areas will at certain times be in darkness, and it may have a negative impact also on some security systems. So yes, I expect that our criminals will certainly exploit this ongoing situation that we refer to as load shedding, because it creates additional opportunities for them in which to operate.
You make a good point there, Dr. Burger, around the ability to plan, because while you and I look at the app that talks about the blackouts, what time you can expect them, the criminals will perhaps be exploiting that to say, actually, if we're going to plan to hit that business, that home, which is in that specific suburb, this may be the perfect time.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, we've seen it before. You know, I always refer to this very simple example of a remote that's, you know, supposed to be used for very positive situations such as opening and closing your gates, opening and closing your car. But criminals use those to block those signals, and they open your car to steal from your car. So we were all surprised at the time that a remote could be used for these purposes. And now you have to plan around it. Now, the same goes for criminals. You know, darkness is the friend of criminals, and they will certainly prefer to go into an area which is in darkness because of load shedding. That will enable them to commit whatever crimes they want to commit, but also during daytime, because they, you know, a number of systems, security systems, are reliant on electrical power. Some have battery backups, but those are also not very reliable. And in addition to that, you take the traffic, especially peak traffic, but also outside of peak traffic, when you have traffic jams, you know, when the traffic lights are out. And that would certainly delay or impact very negatively on the police and private security companies' response times. So there's so many advantages for criminals to exploit that, you know, you can't even begin to list all of them. But certainly this would just create additional opportunities for these criminals.
Yeah, not to mention opportunities for such crimes as smash and grabs while you are stuck in that traffic at those non-working traffic lights. But talk to me about the dynamic of contact crimes, particularly in areas where, you know, it gets dark and there's no lighting, where generally there's poor lighting, but even made worse now with the fact that there'll be no electricity. I imagine that that also shows a trend in as far as contact crimes are concerned.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You know, and often we forget that people living in more affluent areas can afford to upgrade in terms of alternative sources of power, such as generators, batteries, and so forth. You know, you see these gadgets on people's roof to generate alternative electricity. So, but we often forget there are people that cannot afford this kind of thing, and they live in areas that are often most affected by especially violent interpersonal crimes. And when darkness descends on those areas, where streetlights are out and homes are left without electricity, that is where they become victims of these kinds of all kinds of violent crime, including, you know, assault, sexual offences, and so forth. So yeah, these of this kind of outages that we see with the electrical supply certainly have a very negative impact on our security, but has a positive creates a positive climate for criminals in which to operate.
So that we don't end our conversation on a gloomy and perhaps defeatist note, Dr. Burger, what can we do given the circumstances we are facing, that these blackouts are here and they are here to stay regardless of what ESCOM tells us and the various people in the various ministries? So what can we do in the interim?
Well, you know, it's, again, those with access to money, that's got the financial resources, they can upgrade, they can look at alternative sources of electricity and try and maintain their usual way of life, keep their systems, their security systems and so forth running. But in areas where that is not as likely to happen, I think the police, especially the police, should take special care to identify also on the same information from the ESCOM apps, which areas will be affected during which times by load shedding, and then ensure that they divert their patrols into those areas, that they maintain high visibility in those areas, and where possible, even provide the, you know, in sensitive areas, overhead lighting such as they usually use with roadblocks and so forth. So I'm certain a lot of discussion can happen in those areas to look at communities that cannot afford to purchase alternative sources of power or electricity.
Sure. Dr. Johan Burger, I know that I wanted us to end on a positive and constructive note, but what you just said actually breaks my heart, because the last suggestion you make is really sensible. It's sensible, it's practical, that police should be trying to see how they mitigate the impact of crime at the moment when the lights are out. But you and I know the kind of country we live in. That requires proactive policing, but I highly doubt that we will see that being implemented. Dr. Johan Burger, thank you for your input. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, let's hope they listen to this program and that they act on it.
Yeah, hopefully someone is listening. Thank you for that, Dr. Johan Burger there from the Institute for Security Studies, making, you know, some points really that are common sense for people who are charged with ensuring that South Africans are and feel safe. But common sense is not always common. Look at the traffic lights when there's traffic in the afternoons while there are blackouts. Do you see any Metro Police officers conducting traffic in your cities?